here on behind them, so that means I'm going to be a little bit more lucid than normal. I just feel like this is when I should do my interviews because thoughts are actually going through my head instead of thinking about sleeping and stuff. So today I've got Ricky Glore. Ricky Glore is a veteran comedian, actor, and playwright who has a great dry bar special, and his album "World's Greatest Dad" participant is available on all the streaming services. His movie, All Your Friends Are Dead, is coming soon to SRS Cinema. I'm looking forward to talking to Ricky, and here he is. Ricky,
Hello. I
how
was
are you?
just good. I was just sharing the link on all my social media. So if there's anybody that is hopping around and sees this, maybe they can hop on the little live stream here.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. I
Yeah.
uh I I discovered you through the Dry Bar, which is a few years old now, and really enjoyed it. And it's just so funny how Dry Bar has just become this monolith of comedy content, and that they are that this whole clean comedy thing has taken such a surge, and it's starting to, I think it's, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's starting to show up in the clubs now too. There's a new focus on the more clean comedy.
Yeah, there's it's weird. I just had this conversation with a couple friends of mine last night who are also creatives, but the idea of if you ever hear anyone say, "Oh, you can't be funny anymore. You can't joke about that anymore," blah blah blah. There's no comedian worth his salt that is saying that, because even risque comedians, they're not saying that. Like, you don't hear a Dave Chappelle or a Bill Burr being like, "Oh, you can't be funny anymore. You can't say things anymore." They're just doing it, and if
Yeah.
people are offended, whatever. But where that's working in favor for the kind of clean comics for clubs or venues or breweries, vineyards, wineries that have turned into like the modern day coffee houses, happy to put up whatever kind of entertainment, they will ask, "Well, can you work clean?"
Mhm.
And if you can say, "Yeah," that at least gets you in the door of a conversation to then, if they're like, you can be like, "All right, how clean do you want?" And then you say, if you, again, are a comedian that has worked enough, you kind of have the parameters of knowing where you can fit in. You go, "What do you want? Squeaky clean, PG clean? Do you want PG-13 clean? Do you want late night talk show clean? Or do
Right.
you want a little bit more risque late night talk show clean to somewhat R?" And then the people that thought they wanted clean, that didn't know that there was variations of that, will then think about what their audience likes, and they'll go, "Oh, you know what? They like clean, but they like it a little naughty." Like, and then they like bite their like, do the Chris Farley thing. But
Yeah.
then a lot of places will be like, either like, if it's a church or something, or if it's a club that is like, we're really pushing this as 18 and up, or all ages or whatever,
Mhm.
then they'll say squeaky clean. But otherwise, most places that think they want clean, turns out they really want just late night talk show clean,
Yeah.
which the width of what kind of material and things you can talk about on late night talk show TV now is a pretty wide spectrum.
Right.
And I've never felt the restraints of doing a show. And if you're asked, "Can you work clean?" and you can say yes, you're going to find yourself working way more.
Right. Right. And I think sometimes the definition, you talk about these definitions of clean, but sometimes they just they just don't want you to be like social media sometimes. Because everybody says everything on social media, and a lot of it is just trash. And a lot of comedians, a lot of especially newer comedians, they pick up on that and they think that's what they're supposed to say on stage.
I mean,
And
it's this breath of like negativity where, I mean, yeah, social media is a great way to connect everyone, but it also is, you either, your opinions have to be, "I'm 100% for it," which then 100% invites negativity of being against it. There's no social gray area. I mean, and I guess that that is kind of what entertainment is.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but you get, and this isn't a new thing. This has been since even when I started doing stand up in 2005 and hearing people talk about stand ups in the 90s or the 80s boom is you'll have, and for me, two types of comedians. Comedians who their main goal is to get up on stage and entertain, and you usually can't put them in a box of like, well, they're a dry comedian or they're a one liner or whatever. Those comedians usually can have a wide spectrum of kind of the entertainer they are, more of a
Mhm.
vaudevillian, old school kind of just entertainer. Their goal is to entertain whoever comes, whoever the
Mm.
audience is, to not get upset with them, not to berate them. They want to make the room laugh. And by the end of the night, they want everyone to have a good time. That doesn't mean placate,
Right.
but there's that entertainer, and then there's the comedian that goes up on stage, and their primary goal is to show you how smart they are and how funny they are. And I think an audience can smell that a mile away,
Yeah.
and those tend to be the more cynical ones who end up berating an audience when they don't get a response they think they deserve.
Right. Right.
Yeah, with social media, that's where I what you were just saying, the negative kind of comedian who is just, it's hard. It's hard to parse it because the hardest thing for a comedian is finding your voice, and that only
Mhm.
takes time and diligence of performing. Your voice could be cynical, ranty McRanterson,
Yeah.
and but starting off that way, I don't know. It seems to have a very short shelf life.
Yeah, and I've always said you almost have to earn it.
Mhm,
And I got to talk to somebody who knew Lewis Black in the early days. And he was pretty much in the early days like he is now, but it didn't work
mhm.
because he hadn't earned it yet. He knew his voice and he knew what he wanted to do, but the thing is the audiences just didn't get him yet.
Yeah, I mean,
And
you there, and he, part of coming up with your voice and figuring out your character, and then, there are some stand-ups that are like, "Well, that's not honest, you should be your honest self," and blah, blah, blah. Um, he did it because he had a speech impediment, so he
mhm,
talked fast, and he worked it into to ranting because,
yeah,
like, Mel Tillis, a country singer, has a terrible speech impediment, you would never know it by hearing him sing,
right, yeah,
but there's something lyrical to the way that you control your voice that overcomes that speech impediment. And then a lot of that has to do with confidence. Again, this past weekend, and I know we're going to do a bit talk about bits we're working on,
uh-huh,
but an audience can smell from a mile away the confidence in your voice when you're working a new bit. And just like, even if you think you're like, I'm selling it so well, you have to remember that it is new. So don't kill your babies if it doesn't work the first time.
right, yeah.
Know that the audience, for some even subconscious reason that they might not even know, they might not laugh at it that hard because they can tell the distinction between the stuff you're really smooth at doing and you've made it
Mhm.
feel seamless versus this thing that you're not 100% confident with yet.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of criteria when you do that new stuff? Because and I've done it long enough that I know it's not going to land the way I want it the first time, and it's going to if personally, I feel like if it steadily gets better to the point where I think it's good enough that I can roll with it, then I'll keep it in for a while.
Mhm.
But do you have any kind of criteria? Okay, I did this bit, I put it in the middle of two great bits, and it just died. Um, I'm going to try it again, and I get a little bit more. Do you have a point to where you say, okay, I need to put this back for a while and come back to it?
Um, yeah, I mean, that to me is almost two separate questions. One of which, the first part I can say the little bit of advice and the advice that I got from seasoned comedians earlier on, which has then helped me now in this age of filming everything and having crowd work to put online for self promotion and stuff. So many comedians are worried about filming every set because, oh, what if something happens that I can put online to go viral? That's good, and that's a big part of, like, the self-marketing and branding yourself, but if you're working on stuff, I think you should be less worried about filming and more worried about recording the audio and playing it back, because hearing it, that is how it hits an audience's ear first.
Mhm.
Doing the mechanics of whatever physical attribute that you wanna do or act out or dramatics comes later after you get the cadence down, after you make sure that you're articulating it, well enough, and you're getting your point across, you're hitting the joke right, that he can understand what you're saying, the cadence, the pace, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So I think audio recording, and that will help you figure out, "Okay, is this placed in the right area? Is this chunked with other things that are like it or relatable to it, so it's not a logic leap or it's not a big mental leap, like taking a commercial break in the audience's mind to then go to this new ad, this new thing." Um, I've definitely I worked on this one bit for a really long time that just never worked, and I'd talk about it with other comics, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's funny," and I kept on working it in different ways, presenting it different ways, different part of my set, and it was about, caveman serial killers, that the
Yeah.
first, serial killers were cavemen, but if you had like a Law& and Order of it or whatever, every episode would be the same. It is, "What's the weapon?" "It's a rock." Like, and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And, like, the questioning of the if it was Law& and Order and you're going to questioning the different people, the people that get you from point A to point B to get more evidence, it was always the same. It was but anyway, this bit that, like, I tried so much, and, like, I'd come home and I'd tell my wife, and I'd be like, "Caveman serial killer didn't work again tonight. I tried doing this and this," and she's like, "Honey, I know you think it's funny, and maybe some of your other comedy friends think it's funny. Audiences don't think it's funny.
Yeah.
You gotta let it go." And I'm like, "Alright."
It's hard though. I've had a few that I just absolutely love that it's just not going to work. One of them is dissing Led Zeppelin, and you just can't diss Led Zeppelin. It just doesn't work. They don't even boo you most of the time. They just go totally silent. And
And it's crazy because I think Led Zeppelin, maybe I'm not speaking correctly in this, never had a top 5 hit or even a top 3 hit. I don't think they have a number 1
I don't
song.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
they're
think
this
maybe
juggernaut of a band.
yeah, I think Stairway to Heaven was probably their biggest charter, and it may have hit top 10, but yeah, and my joke is really like, I talk about boomers because I am one, and how we hang on to Led Zeppelin, and I'm like, well, Led Zeppelin's a fine band. I've just
Mhm.
listened to enough Led Zeppelin. I don't need any more. And it's just like bam, it sucks
Mhm.
all the energy out of the audience because kids, you know, 18-year-olds love Led Zeppelin now.
Well,
And
there's a funny, TikTok video where a guy's going around and approaching people at, like, a theme park that are wearing band T-shirts that
uh
are sold at, like, Walmart and stuff and whatnot, and, like, this woman's wearing a Kiss T-shirt, and he's like, "I'll give you $5 if you name 3 Kiss songs." Goes up to another person wearing Led Zeppelin's like, "I'll give you $5 if you can name 2 Led Zeppelin songs," and, like, no one can name the songs until he gets to this guy, which, like, stereotypical Ozzy Osbourne looking fan wearing a Black Sabbath shirt, and he's like, "Give you
yeah.
$5 if you name 3 Ozzy Osbournes or Black Sabbath songs," and he does immediately, but
Yeah. That's funny. My I caught my daughter with a Blondie t-shirt on a few years ago, and she was able to name the songs because she actually likes music, so that was helpful. One of the bits that I love of yours that came up, this is funny, this is just a personal story that came up when we were FaceTiming my grandson. He's 4. So it was a whole dad bod thing, and
oh, okay.
and he was saying, he said something like, why does daddy and grandpa have big stomachs and no butt? Because he's like, he's totally obsessed with butts right now. And my daughter said, well, that's a dad bod. That's what you get when you're a dad. And I had just listened to your dry bar right
Nice.
before that. So we're talking about dad bods, and there was like a pause, and then he just started crying, and he said, "I don't want a dad bod." I just thought, oh man, this is perfect. I have to work this in as a bit myself because the kid does not want a dad bod.
And you're just like, "Abstinence, learn it now."
Yeah.
No, and that's, like, part of my bit was, that I had and I was much heavier for a lot of years. It's a new bit now that's on the new album. I extrapolated more from that idea is just like, it's nice that men get a cute nickname for how their bodies look after they have a kid. They've done nothing
Yeah.
to make that child. They didn't
Yeah.
carry around they didn't carry around a human being in them stretching out their bodies for 9 months to look the way they do. No, I
Uh,
carried around a 1-pound bag of Cheetos for 20 years.
yeah.
Like, yeah, just that whole idea of, why do we get a cute nickname for that to excuse our softness? But it's because there's no woman in the world that would want a nickname describing how their bodies look after they pushed a child outside of them.
Right, yeah. The mom bod. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that doesn't work.
mom shape or wife weight.
Yeah. One of my favorite, bits on the new album, World's Greatest Dad, is the whole size of shirts thing.
Oh, thank you.
What so, just to go into it, you talk about size of shirts and how it makes you feel bad about yourself. What did it take to get that bit from start to finish? That seems like one that's got some time on it that you've been working it for quite a while. What did it take to get from when you came up with the idea to what you put on the album?
What's crazy with that one is that is still one that doesn't consistently work.
Huh.
Um, that one sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, and I can take the blame of it of myself, and it is one that I've worked for a long time. I was working on that when I did my first album, and it never worked the way I wanted it to, so I sidelined it. Um, there was a couple extra things around it that I have felt supported a little bit more of like going into clothing sizes for my daughter, my toddler, and then just being like babies and how great it is that little kids, babies and toddlers have their own sizing system up into a certain age,
Mhm.
5T, and after that they have to join the real world of
Yeah.
sizes. And, like, being someone who has lost weight, 140 pounds in the last year, like, I can shop in stores now.
Yeah.
Like, Target would have only up to 2 X's, and I was wearing a 3X or a 4X sometimes,
Mhm.
and because I think we different people push back on this, but I think we are a sizist culture where we don't want people of a certain size shopping inside Target, which Target is known for being a more affluent, better looking Walmart.
Yeah.
So they want their
Yeah, for sure.
MILFs, they want their college kids, they want, so they didn't want someone who looked at me when I was wearing 4Xs because they sell those clothes online. They just never kept them stocked in their store.
Right.
So I just thought of like, oh, well, like, the names of shirts even make me feel like we're shaming people. And there's an extra joke that I actually just thought of this past weekend, and it's not even a joke yet, it's more of an observation and just a play on words that I don't know if there is a joke there, but for the album, it's, uh, who came up with the names of shirt sizes? Like, the first one's and you ask the audience, "Small," and then someone says, "Extra small." And it's like, "Extra small," and, like,
Yeah.
it's small because small rhymes with "aw," like, that's cute.
Yeah.
Middle, medium, middle of the road, average, nothing exciting there, and then the last one is large, like, no one feels good wearing a large. It's you're
Mm.
just saying that you're large, and then I'm like and the person who came up with the names, how lazy did they get that after that, they're like, "I can't think of any more names, like, if you get any bigger than a large, we're just gonna throw some X's and numbers in front of it." The the supplemental stuff that I thought of this weekend was because I keep on asking the audience what the names of the sizes are and progressively go. And women say extra small. And I'm like, it's so interesting. No man ever from the audience says extra small. It's
Right.
women because that is a badge of honor of like wearing extra small. And made me think of the wordplay of, to me, it's interesting that there's extra small. That means smaller than small. There is more small.
Yeah.
There is less shirt, but it's extra small. But when you get to the other end of the spectrum, it's extra large, which means more shirt.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the joke is there, but I think it's interesting that there is extras on both end of the spectrum, but they both mean something that is the complete opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there is something there. Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but I just thought of it this weekend, that
Yeah.
wordplay, and I'm like, "I don't know what the joke is, but there's something interesting that when it's small and it's extra." And see, this is the nerdy comic thing, like, I'll probably present this the next time I do a road trip with, like, 2 opening comedians. I'll
Uh-huh.
throw this out in the car and be like, "Hey, I'm working on this thing, blah, blah, blah," and we'll maybe talk about it, and then 30 minutes later, someone will say, "Well, what if it's this?" And then we'll be like, nah, nah."
Yeah.
Or if we do
Yeah.
come up with something, it'd be like, "Okay, tonight, I'm gonna slide that in, the bit here, and see if it works, and then let's see if we ruminate on anything else."
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the it's good to be able to do that, and I do think you have something because especially if you go into material, because extra small is less material, yet extra
Mhm.
large is more material, and it costs 3 times more. You know, which has always been the case because I had to go to big and tall places for so long, and
Oh, yeah.
now big and tall places don't cater to me because I'm a large tall, and they all start at extra large tall, and so
Yes.
it's all too big on me. And I've tried jokes around that before, and if you're not in it, if you're not my height and have to go there, you just don't understand it. So
Well, and
it's
all my height's in my torso, so, like,
yeah.
I have a hard time with button-down shirts being long enough too. I have
Y-
short legs. I have 29-inch legs.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I'm 5'10" and a half, so all
Oh
my height
yeah.
is in my torso.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're built exactly like my son-in-law because he's all torso too, and he's I think he's 5'10" and a half, 5'11", something like that. That's funny. So one of the things, and this isn't really comedy related, but it I can tell that you are a horror geek because I did a little bit of internet stalking, and one of your favorite movies is
And all the
Phantasm.
posters
Yeah.
around me,
Yeah.
Psycho 2, Halloween
Yeah.
2, Scream 2, Nightmare on Elm Street, Phantasm 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Phantasm fan, and I um I like the fact that you're doing this movie's coming out,
Mhm.
and I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I watched a trailer and it looks pretty intriguing. And I know you've got a joke about it, talking about how the killer's never the fat guy,
Yeah.
and so what's the movie about? Because I'm intrigued by it.
The movies, All Your Friends Are Dead, super indie, low budget. We made it for $5,959.
Uh
And, I wrote, directed, starred in, produced, costumed, did everything. When you're making a movie for that little, you have to do everything, and so that's one of the only reasons that I'm in it, because we needed a dedicated actor that when me and the co-director and the cinematographer, Nicholas Hyance, when we were constructing the story, we were like, "Okay, whoever our lead is, we have to have it be someone, and we have to have the story be something that we could do stuff that is just them and the camera." And they're like, "Well,
mhm,
that's me." And so the story we came up with was semi-autobiographical. I had hurt my knee playing football in high school. I was a state wrestler, baseball player, and did football. Also dabbled in theater and chorus and stuff,
uh-huh,
but definitely was on the sports track. And I was in a wheelchair for 6 months and had to have 3 knee surgeries. But then immediately when I could, I auditioned for West Side Story, the spring musical. Did that and then did theater all of my senior year and then went to college for theater and for writing and for playwriting. And then improv and sketch comedy, trying to live the SNL dream, eventually
Mhm.
moved to Chicago. But so my injury could have easily put me in a very, I mean, I had a very good support system, but I could have fallen into a bout of depression and drinking and painkillers, which I definitely did drink. The most that I've ever drank was during that time of recuperation,
Mhm.
but I did have, not to a detrimental point, um, but we were looking at that and we were like, "Okay, what if I was that and I went the other way?" That I got that I was king of the mountain, or what I like to am I allowed to loosely curse on this or stay
Yeah,
clean?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
King shit of Turd Mountain.
Uh-huh.
In this, like, Northern Kentucky, like, a star football player who has his tight-knit group of friends, like the Breakfast Club, and gets hurt and then disconnects from those. Well, so I was like, if I hadn't have gotten hurt in high school, I'd have gone probably to Cumberland College in Kentucky to wrestle, and I
Mhm.
probably would have gotten hurt in college. Um, and, like, what would I have done with my life? Like, what would I have done
Yeah.
with getting hurt with a wrestling degree?
Yeah.
Like, maybe I would have pivoted then, but that would have been later and would have been probably harder to deal with. So what if that had happened and I had gone into depression and drugs and alcohol and disconnected myself from all my friends? And then years later, what if it then became what if it went from the Breakfast Club, becomes the Big Chill, and goes camping in a Friday the 13th movie?
Yeah.
And so that's what the movie's about. It deals a lot with mental health. It deals a lot with what happens when the teenage slasher movie grows up.
Uh-huh.
So instead of high school kids or even college kids out camping, what if it's middle-aged people who have the struggle, instead of the struggles being like, "Oh, I wonder if I'm gonna get laid this weekend," or, "Oh, I wonder if that guy or girl likes me. I
Yeah.
hope I don't get killed." It's, "Ugh, I got kids and taxes and a mortgage and a divorce, and my life is not going the way I thought it should
Yeah.
be going." So all the horrors of real life world for people 38 and 40 years old, then a masked psychopath killer shows up to pick them off one by one. So there's the real life fear. So the movie is a dark comedy slasher film, and it was interesting to balance mental health because we sensitive and aware enough and to know that any humor based around that is going to be impossible for some people to watch or not want to take part of.
Mhm.
But we handled it in a way that any of the humor that had to deal with suicide or mental health was earnest humor. So, like, one of the jokes, to give an example of that, is my character goes to kill himself and to hang himself. And while we were filming it, I was like, oh, I got to look up a YouTube tutorial on how to tie a proper noose knot.
Uh-huh.
And Nick Hines, the co-writer and co-director, was like, oh, this needs to be part of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to watch a tutorial on how to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, "That's hilarious." And so, like, a lot of the humor dealing with that is just honest, kind of awkward, relatable humor. Um,
And
and then
the commentary that there are YouTube videos showing you how to kill yourself, I think is it's really good to be in the movie. Just I mean, just saying, if you want to, there's stuff out there to showing you how to make a bomb. There's stuff
yeah.
showing you how to tie a noose properly. There anything you want's out there.
And luckily, when you go to Google, if you type in "how to tie a noose," the suicide prevention hotline number is the first thing appears.
Yeah.
So, like, that is good, and, like, we have that at the end of the movie too. I mean, there's been a few people that are just like, that doesn't skirt the issue of you're making fun of, like, "Oh, we're not making fun of it," but horror fans, horror and comedy, I think, congruently run the same path. Like,
Yeah.
eliciting a fear or a scream is very similar to eliciting a laugh.
Right.
And if you can play those things off of one another, you can maybe get a more intense scare or a more intense laugh because you're on that roller coaster.
Yeah.
And, and so we were lucky enough to, after some festivals, get a small distribution with SRS Cinema, who release very indie, uh, really some fun, like, niche horror movies. So that's gonna be on a limited run Blu-ray starting to be sold on their website in March, and then it's gonna be on digital streaming, and we're looking to get a couple investors and producers for our next horror comedy/musical that we're looking to film in July.
That's great. I've been a horror fan since I was a kid, and I had a couple guys in South Bend that we would just sit around and talk about horror movies, and they had a podcast about horror movies, and I'd bring in ones that they'd never heard of, and like the old Hammer films and stuff
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, and it's always fun, and it's comedians in general are geeky about something other than comedy. They've all got a geek, and some of it's Dungeons and Dragons, some of it's the Marvel universe or Star Wars or stuff like that. When I find a real hardcore horror geek, I know that I'm talking to one of my people, and there's not as many of the hardcore horror geeks, but if you're a hardcore horror geek, you're also probably either a comedian or a comedy geek too.
Well, I mean, and I think that we're seeing the representation of humor and horror, um, being kind of a peanut butter and jelly right now. You have Jordan Peele,
Hmm.
who is one of the top mentioned people when you're talking about horror right now in the last 15 years. And then Ari Aster, who did Hereditary and Midsommar.
Hmm.
Midsommar, which I grew up loving Wicker Man, which is one of my
Yeah,
favorite horror movies, the original one, not the Nick Cage one. Um, and you mentioned Hammer, Christopher Lee in there, and a lot of
yeah,
Hammer people in there.
yeah,
But Midsommar, it's a divisive movie. Some people love it, some people hate it. But, like, for me, I thought the movie was hilarious because how honest it is with the relationship and the humors and the situations.
yeah,
And so, like, that is what is jazzing me about wanting to do. So I also do a lot of musical stuff, and I did in Chicago with my Black Box, live theater musicals.
mhm,
I think music is also one of the most emotionally expressive things and can tap into people. So if you can add that to the track of comedy and horror and music, so you get those three emotions and you can blend and play those off each other,
yeah,
that's what really, really excites me about doing anything film wise. You mentioned Phantasm. Like,
yeah,
if you find, like, there are people who are just like, oh yeah, I like horror. I like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger. Like, that's fine. Or Ghostface.
yeah,
Phantasm should be more popular than it is. And I think it is inching more and more. But like you mentioning being a fan of that, and I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's good taste in horror.
yeah, yeah. That was so I remember seeing that on a VHS tape that I rented in the '80s, and the so I thought two was a little bit better than one.
It's the
Uh,
Terminator 2. It's
yeah,
aliens.
yeah,
It's
and
bigger, more action. Yeah.
but that last one that came out a few years ago was just nuts, and seeing everybody old, it
Yeah.
was just it was kinda hard to watch, but it was still interesting.
But they're
Um,
doing, and like kudos to them, like David Hartman, who took over the directing duties from Don Coscarelli for that and was a major writer on it. I interviewed on a movie podcast that we used to do, and me and my co-host, who are big fans, I mean PHANS fans,
yeah.
Phantasm fans of the series, like every time a Phantasm movie would come out, I would so like when 4 came out, which was incredibly low budget. They would take like 5 years. Like, so the first sequel came out 10 years after the first one.
Yeah.
The third sequel came out 5 years after the second one. The fourth sequel came out 5 years after the third. Like,
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, the story's so complex. It's so interesting. I think they know where they're going. And then the fourth one was supposed to be the last one. I'm like, you brought up more questions in that one. And so then I met Don Coscarelli and I was like, so is it this? Is it this? Is it this? He's like, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I just made it up from movie to movie.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. So David Hartman, who was a fan, was like, okay, I was trying to string some of these ideas together to put a finite end on it. And
Uh-huh.
the stuff he did, I mean, they were just geeking out now on Phantasm
Yeah.
Ravager in the series. And people are like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Um, but they started making that as a web series that was going to be called Reggie Tales, playing off
Oh,
of Veggie
okay.
Tales.
Yeah.
And so they strung those together to make the movie and then filmed more stuff. That took them, I think, 10 years or 12 years
Yeah, I
to
remember there was a
compile
lot
Ravager.
yeah, there was a lot of time around it, yeah.
So so Phantasm deals with dimensions and time, but Angus Grimm was so old and they didn't give him a wig to make his
Yeah.
hair look like there's a lot of interesting things in Ravager, and it is an indie movie in all sense of the term.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that it it wasn't as good as Phantasm fans have felt the series could be. So that is one of the few series, like Elm Street's my number one.
Uh-huh.
My favorite franchise. Love what Wes Craven did with Elm Street.
Yeah.
I think it's the scariest because it's the closest any moviegoer can have to like, yeah, there could be someone in a mask chasing you, but you can watch A Nightmare on Elm Street and that night go to bed and go through exactly what the kids in the movies go through
Yeah.
by having a dream of Freddy. Um, that being said, if any studio was ever like, Ricky Glore, we love what you're doing. What's your take on a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie? I'd be like, no, thank you. I have too much love and respect for the original. But if they came to me and they said, what franchise would you like to reboot or do a new spin on? I think Phantasm could be an amazing mini series, like an HBO Max mini series or
Oh, yeah.
Netflix or a new series of films, because at its core, the story of family and chosen family of Jody, Mike, and Reggie, and the loss of parents, and just all the themes and
Yeah.
metaphors and symbolism, I think are so rich in there in that series that it could, if you planned out a beginning, middle, and end for a new franchise or a miniseries, I think it could be amazing because it already
Yeah.
has a Ray Bradbury something wicked this way comes vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
That's
sci-fi
my yeah.
without understanding exactly where the sci-fi comes from,
And
and
that's my rant on Phantasm. If you
yeah.
haven't never seen it, I do suggest, like, when I've shown Phantasm to people who aren't familiar, I do typically show them 2 first because
Yeah.
I think it is the easiest one to swallow.
Yeah, 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 for sure. It makes more sense, and there's a little bit more plot.
Mhm.
And yeah, 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 for sure. Okay, enough horror talk.
Welcome back to Horror Talk.
Yeah. I just couldn't resist. You know, when I find a Phantasm fan, I have to bring it up because
Well,
there's
and on my first 2 albums, so on the, Dad Bod Dry Bar Special, 2 of my bits from Spitting Image, the horror bits are on there. World's Greatest Dad Participant, I have 2 new horror bits on there, and then I'm gonna be filming my next, filmed special in April for 4 by 3 Comedy, and, you'll see those 2 bits from the album and another smaller bit that wasn't on the album, because, yeah, I love horror.
yeah, yeah. I feel like you could probably do a whole album just about horror movies.
The glossiness of some people's faces when
Yeah,
you're talking about horror, though,
yeah,
like, I mean, it's never, like, completely not worked, but I'm definitely more excited than most of the people in the audience.
yeah, 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 for sure. So before we get into is this anything, the fact that you've been doing this since you were a young guy. Were you in your early 20s when you started?
Yeah, well, I was 19.
19? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I started in 2005. My local comedy club, because I was born and raised in Northern Kentucky, they had a Funny Bone at Newport on the Levee, and they used to have 18 and up shows. First show Friday and first show Saturday, I think, and maybe their Thursday show was 18 and up. And then my dad and I would go, and then one day they made it all 21 and up, and I was just like, oh man. And then I looked, and Kentucky has a weird law where you can be 19 in a day and serve alcohol. So I applied to be a server there. Is the loophole, since I couldn't see shows, I could work there and see
Uh-huh.
shows. And while doing that, I saw that they were offering a stand-up class, taught by Jeff Jenna, another dry bar comedian.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I signed up for that class. And the first class, there was like 50 students. And the first class was free. And he said, if you're in this class because you think I can make you funnier, don't come to the next class where I start charging you money. He's like, but
Uh,
if you're here because I'm going to make you write every week and get on stage and perform 2 minutes of original material every week and help you hone your voice and what you think you should be talking about on stage, which it'll culminate in everybody doing a 5-minute set in front of a packed house.
mhm.
He's like, then yes, stay with the class. I will give you prompts. I will give you my opinion on your material. Even if I don't think it's funny, I'll try to see if it's the most honest version of you and blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Next class, there were 10 of us.
Ah.
And I took that class. And because I worked there as a server, I started doing the open mics there, started doing bar open mics all around Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And then after I graduated the class and I kind of pseudo auditioned for the general manager at the club, I got my first weekend, which was for Finesse Mitchell in 2005 or beginning of 2006,
Uh-huh.
and then kind of became the house MC and definitely serving there. Anytime anyone from SNL or that I was a big fan of was coming through, I'd see him on the calendar and I'd be like, "Can I MC for them? Can I MC
Yeah.
for them?" Like having no awareness of like the differences between urban acts and me being super white and nerdy
Yeah.
19-year-old kid of just being like, "I don't care, it's an audience, right?"
Right.
But then a lot of those comics, like Finesse Mitchell, my first weekend, like, he didn't straight up say, like, "Is this your first weekend?" He was just like, "Have you ever performed in front of a black audience?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." He's like, "Okay, good. So you know that off the bat as the MC, you have to be in their face and be louder than they are, and don't stand up against the wall, like, be
Ye
on the lip of the stage."
yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." But so, like, that immediately, like, I learned, and I was just like, "Oh, okay." Little bit he's like, "'Cause they'll eat you alive." And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and then so it was just having that, like, comedy school of, my first weekend that I did 30 minutes and started kind of transitioning into feature act was Jim Brewer was supposed to MC, and this is a couple years in, working at the Funny Bone, and the show was about to start, and Jim, Brewer and the feature act weren't there yet. So the sound guy came down to me and the lights were off, standing stage left, and he's just like, "Hey, you got to just keep on going." And he's like, "I'll give you a flashy light to bring up the feature act, and here's his name." And I was like, "All right." And at that time, I was like, I maybe had 20 minutes, but I
Uh-huh.
felt comfortable. And I was like, "All right, I guess I'll do some crowd work and try." I mean, it was an MC. You're not supposed to do crowd work.
Right.
And so the show's getting ready to start, and the announcer's getting ready to say, "Welcome to stage, your local host and MC, Ricky Glore." And Jim Brewer comes up. I had not met him yet. And he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "Are you Ricky? You're the MC for the weekend, man?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, there's not gonna be a feature act, man. You gotta go up there and do 35 minutes and then just bring me up. Okay, have a good show." And like walked away, and I was like, "Okay." And so then the whole weekend was just him and me doing 35 and bringing him up and doing an hour. And so, like, in that first 35 minutes, like, I go up on stage and it's that out of body, like, my mouth is going for my opening joke, but, like, words are coming out and I'm moving and doing it, but in my head, I'm like, "Okay, I've gotta do 35 minutes. I gotta slow this down. Do I extend this, make jokes on my feet about this? There's this new thing I hadn't done before. Let's do that in the middle because" well, like, just almost like a beautiful mind doing the math equations, which I'm awful
Yeah.
at math,
Uh-huh.
but, like, doing that. So, like, the the having it afforded to me that I could work with so many different kind of acts and in different ways at that Funny Bone from 2005 to about 2009 w- was so valuable.
Yeah.
That that was my comedy school, my comedy training. Um, Jerry Seinfeld's documentary Comedian used to be my Bible.
Uh-huh.
And then when Orny Adams came through, I was like, "Oh, that's that asshole from Comedian. He's gonna
Yeah.
be awful." And I went and saw him on a Thursday, and it is still to this day one of the funniest hours I've ever seen.
Wow.
So smart,
Yeah.
energy. Afterwards, he didn't know I worked there because I just came on my night off. And I was just like, "Oh my god." I was like, "I love the documentary Comedian and blah, blah, blah." He's like, "Oh, thanks, man." He's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I work here, but I'm off, and I also do stand-up." And he's like, "Oh, are you working Sunday?" And I was like, "No, I'm off Sunday." And he's like, "You wanna come and do 20 minutes?" And I was like, "Okay." Like, no comedian offers someone they have no idea who they are
Yeah. Right.
20 minutes. And he did, and that was such and he was awesome. He was awesome to talk to and work with, and that yeah, that working there at the Funny Bone, being a house MC for, 4 years was just like comedy college.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. It's funny, one of the common themes, you're probably the 145th comic I've talked to, and one of the common themes is almost everybody gets thrown into something that they're not ready for or they don't think they're ready for, and when they come out of that and they're okay, that seems to be the impetus to keep you going on.
Yeah, it's the trial by fire,
Yeah.
100%. I had taken some time off, like, doing, stand-up intermittently while I lived in Chicago from 2009 to 2017, but, because I was doing sketch, improv, and then black box theater, um, stand-up kinda went on the back burner, and anybody that loves stand-up in Chicago, Zanies, that used to be run by Bert Haas, I've had my Bert Haas experience, um, plenty of stories about that, but when I moved back to Northern Kentucky after I got married, I started leaning more into stand-up because the scene kinda changed. There wasn't as much, affordability for theater in Northern Kentucky, but I realized, "Oh, it doesn't matter what your home base is, you can do stand-up and take it on the road." And what's interesting about a lot of comedians and musicians, a lot of creatives in the Cincinnati area have a don't ask for opportunities or don't make opportunities for yourself, wait until you are asked. And,
Yeah.
like, that has never been my mentality on anything.
Yeah.
I like, you gotta be your own champion, and you gotta make things happen and ask and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so, after being back for about 8 months in 2017, I hooked up with some other comics that I had worked with previously and some new ones that I just met, and we started figuring out that breweries, like I said before, are modern day coffee houses, and I put together a tour where there'd be 3 comedians, an MC, a feature, and a headliner, where every show on this tour out of state that we would do, we called it the Brew Crew Comedy Tour because none
Uh-huh.
of us had names, not to be confused with there's another brewery comedy tour thing. Um, we just came up with that name because none of us had any notoriety, so no one was gonna come out and see us,
Uh-huh.
just something catchy. Every show we did, we would rotate where we were in the lineup. So it would make us work on our times, like,
Right.
maybe we didn't have 40 minutes, but we were gonna work it, and then the next show we would be MC, then the next show we'd be feature, working those different muscles, and I did that for a year and then submitted to Dry Bar. So then after being back for a year, that's how I then pivoted into dry bar, just pushing myself to keep going up the ladder and doing as many shows out of like, I don't do a lot of shows in Cincinnati or Northern
Uh-huh.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Um, I do most and I work on most I don't do a lot of open mics, I work on my stuff on the road,
Mhm.
and, it's I could, but it's not like New York City, and it's not like LA where there's these awesome open mics every night of the week. There is a very and I know there's different scenes like this. Cincinnati has a very territorial scene, but unfortunately, a lot of comedians in Cincinnati don't leave the city.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things about open mics, I was talking to somebody about this last night because I still do quite a few open mics, is you don't get people like you showing up to the open mics anymore. You don't get the veteran comic showing up. So there's nothing really there that makes you want to elevate your game. You
Mm.
know, it's you don't see anything to aspire to because you're all pretty much on the same level.
Yeah,
And
and I've happily, what's hard for me is I'm a little bit of an orphan when it comes to having a comedy home because my Newport on the Levee club closed while I was in Chicago, and the other comedy club was Go Bananas, and they're a more, they are a a more like, we know it we're against the corporate of the getting paid to do stand up.
yeah.
Um, I mean, they're the more emo, more like, "Oh, we're it's art," and stand-up is just standing there and dryly telling jokes and blah, 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 and, like, that's fine, but, like, I will forever be branded with the scarlet letter of having started at Funny Bone,
Yeah.
a corporate business entity, and I mean, I get the merits for both kinda clubs. You Go Bananas is more avant-garde, and that is fine, but, like, I don't have that home club. I don't have that loyalty here, but whenever anyone does put on a show or it runs a new mic, if they reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, if you ever have anything to work on, feel free to come by." I've done that.
Mhm.
It's just I mean, I've heard some people talk about this in St. Louis and stuff, and it's everywhere, but, like, when I was down in Florida for about 4 months over the summer, I have never felt more accepted than in the Miami,
Oh.
open mic scene.
Mhm.
Like, I had to be down there for some family things, with my in-laws. My father-in-law passed away, and, um, when I started going I had to cancel some scheduled gigs that I had, and then when after the family things were being taken care of, I started doing some more mics and rescheduling those shows, and, was only supposed to be there for 2 weeks, ended up being there for, like, 3 months.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I just reached out to a couple, people that ran some mics in Miami and around that area, and that scene was so warm and welcoming. Like, and I hate to besmirch the scene where I live around,
Mhm.
but man, if the scene up here was like it is down there, of how they're like on mics, they had these people doing characters. They had a magician on it, and they were just like, "Yeah, man, whatever makes this mic the coolest and gets audiences here on a Wednesday, a Thursday, or a Tuesday, like, we're down to do." And
Uh-huh.
I was like, "This is great. You guys are doing it right here." And their audiences were packed.
Yeah, that that makes sense. I have always loved mixed open mics
Mhm.
with the music, the characters, poetry,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And
Palate cleansers.
yeah, and I always did it because it gave you more time
Yeah.
because it was usually 10, 15 minutes they'd give you instead of 3 to 5.
Oh,
And
and that's the 3 to 5 minutes and having 30 comedians. Oh my gosh, yeah, you're not stretching any muscles, you're doing
right.
it for other comedians.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will be the first to say, when someone goes up on stage with an instrument, a guitar or piano, and look, I play a ukulele in
Uh-huh.
some of my shows, I do have a little bit of a, "Oof, alright."
Yeah.
Let's see this. But, like, I'm always down for it, and I'm always more pleasantly surprised
Yeah.
than I am, upset after they're done.
Yeah, same, same. Yeah, we've got a guy here locally that will bring a guitar up on stage and really short, funny songs, but he incorporates it. He'll put the guitar down and do a little bit of stand up. Then he'll pick the guitar back up. It's a nice mix, and he's got a pretty good idea. He's newer, but he's got a pretty good idea of how much music he can get away with
Mhm.
and still keep the interest. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and I wish that more open mics in smaller scenes, which is pretty much everything except for New York, LA, and
Mhm.
Chicago, well, Denver. Um,
Denver, yeah, Denver's huge.
yeah, but in the smaller scenes, if they would make them longer sets, mixed mics, and get that crowd in there, because a music act, somebody that comes in and plays a couple songs, is probably going to bring more friends than a comedy act, because you've already
Mhm.
asked your friends to come to your comedy show 150 times, and it's just going to be the 151st no that, that you get, or yeah, we'll try, and never
And
show
I
up.
and
Yeah.
I get it, like, the people who put together these mics, people have their different reasonings for, "Okay, I'll do this for you because I want you to, book me on this and that." The politics of anything always get in the way
Yeah.
of creativity, unfortunately, and business in the same way, and especially a lot of young comedians, you're so focused on working on your art that you don't have time or the acumen for the business angle of it. That's a whole nother level. But I just wish if someone's comedy, like, I don't know that I would be a fan of me because
Hmm.
I'm not the kind of comedian that I like, that I watch.
Uh-huh.
Not saying I dislike what I do, but,
Right.
like, if you were to say, "Ricky, you remind me of," like, I'm not looking for adulation, but, like, if you likened me to another comedian, like, "Oh, Ricky Glore is like," and then you name someone that people have heard of,
Hmm.
there's a good chance that that person wouldn't be in my top 3 favorite comedians.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so, like, open micers and people who run these rooms and these smaller independent rooms, you can sit and watch a clip or these festivals and just have a good enough ear that even if it isn't your cup of tea, that you go, "Ooh, I this person, they've got something."
Yeah.
And it's not even like affirmative action where they're filling a void of like, "Well, we gotta have X amount of blah, blah." There's a little bit of that that should exist so you're not having the same 22-year-old white
Yeah.
college kid talking about masturbating and
Yeah.
blah, 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 and living in your parents' basement. But, like, recognizing that even if it's something that you don't love, you should have that be part of the night because it will be different and it will be interesting,
Yeah.
and it is just as valid.
Yeah. And a lot of bookers get tunnel vision in that sense, where they only want alt comics, or they only want this cross section of comedy, and that limits their audience, because some people don't want to hear the alt comic. They want to see somebody like you that talks about real life and
And I
has.
get it, like, I didn't talk about real life until I got married and moved back to
Yeah.
Kentucky. I used
Uh-huh.
to do one-liners, and, like, I was a college kid, and I didn't a lot of my stuff that I talk about, like, being from Kentucky and stuff, I obviously experienced it. I didn't have the foresight and the removal of time from it, the distance, to recognize the humor in it. Like, I knew
Uh-huh.
it was, like, I thought it was funny, but I never, for some reason, I never thought anyone else would think it was funny on stage
Right.
that wasn't from where I grew up.
Yeah. 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 It's a maturity that has to come. I think it just has to come to you almost with age, before you can actually look back at yourself and use that critical eye to figure out, is this really who I am, or
Yeah,
is this really
and
what's working?
the
And
maturity of, yeah, and that's discovering your voice and, like, the maturity of communicating. So, like, there's stuff on this album about my mother-in-law that when I put it together, I went to her and I was like, "Would you be okay that I talk about this?" She's like, "Oh my god, I'd be honored." So it's
Yeah.
called Brenda on the album. And so, like, there's some things that, like, will happen in my personal life that I haven't talked about on stage yet because I haven't figured out the the therapeutic, humoristic way of presenting it. Or there's a couple things where I've said to my wife, like, "Just so you know, I'm probably not gonna talk about this because it's maybe too personal." And she's like, "Yeah, I appreciate that." But then
Uh,
there's other things where I'll talk about my wife, and I'm like, "Are you okay with me talking about you having a C-section
mhm,
on stage and blah, blah, blah?" And she's like, "Yeah." And it's just communicating and being honest. And through that, like, I try not to be that annoying comedian of examining at everything and being like, "Is that a bit? Is that a bit? Can that be a bit? Can
mm,
that be a bit?" It's more like it happens a couple days later. Like, this is a perfect example. This past weekend, um, I improvised this bit that my wife and I had joked about for years. What
uh,
women think versus what men think. When a woman asks a man, "What are you thinking?" and he says, "Nothing." And the woman's like, "Really?" And they don't trust you. And, like, for men, it's like, "No, we're sitting there slack-jawed,
yeah.
ne'er a thought in our heads." We're running the theme to Bonanza.
Yeah.
And it's and then you'll add lyrics to it, "Gonna eat, gonna sleep, gonna shit, gonna shave, gonna do
Yeah.
it. Gonna eat, gonna sleep, gonna shit, gonna shave, gonna do it all again.
Yeah.
Eat and sleep, shit and shave, da 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 da." It's like, then you ask a woman, and women have more things they have to think of. Societally, we've made women make lists.
Yeah.
um, and be the caretakers of things. And so you ask your wife, like, "Well, what are you thinking about?" And they'll be like, "Ah, nothing." But inside their heads, they're going,
Yeah.
"Okay, I gotta wake up tomorrow at 6 a.m., gotta get the kids up, gotta get them dressed, gotta get their lunches together, gotta get them to school. And once I get to work, I'm gonna go up to Kathy and I'm gonna tell her I'm sorry because I told her yesterday that I didn't think her scarf was good and blah, blah, blah." Like, and so I improvised that on in the first I did 3 shows in a row on Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida. And in the first show, I improvised that, and the booker came up to me afterwards, and he's like, "Oh my god." He's like, "That bit with the Bonanza theme was hilarious." I was like, "I improvised it." I was like, "That's something I'd said to my wife before, but I've never done it on stage." He's like, "That seemed like a fully formed, written out bit."
Wow.
And
That's
so I was like,
great.
"You know what? I think I'm gonna work on it for the 2nd show." And so I fine-tuned it 2nd show, and by the 3rd show, I had it almost pitch perfect to
Uh-huh.
the point that the women in the audience, I had to wait for an applause break during the rant of what a woman's thinking.
Uh-huh.
And so that was one of those of, like, it's something my wife and I had done jokingly, and my
Yeah.
wife had thought it was funny, but I probably did that for the first time 5 years ago and had never thought about incorporating it into stand-up.
Uh-huh. That's great, and that's great when it, like, hits so early,
Yeah.
when you know it's good right out of the gate. That's a fantastic feeling, and it doesn't happen all that often.
No.
It takes
Never.
a lot of work.
That's the comedian's dream, that's the
Yeah.
lottery, is you're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, in the middle of my set, maybe I'll do crowd work," and you know what that's gonna do? That's gonna open up a door to a new hour set or some
Yeah.
ideas that
Yeah.
rarely does that, and I've tried that, like, on the album, I have a Q&A portion that I've
Mhm.
started doing because that that is the closest to, like, improv. Good improvisers have done it so many times that they'll make you think you're seeing something spontaneous, but
Mhm.
it's ideas and stuff they've worked with before, so they got a good idea. That's a little bit of the magic act, or like, if you've ever have seen, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Canadian comedian, um, oh, there's and also, I'm blank. Harlan Williams also. It's not the
Yeah.
comedian I was thinking of. Harlan Williams does crowd work, and he makes everyone think that the shows are brand new every time.
Yeah.
He's done it so many times, he's
Yeah.
able to weave in the
Yeah.
preconceived
Are you talking
bits.
about, Ian Bagg?
Ian Bag, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My wife saw Ian when I was opening for him years ago in Florida, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, every show is different." and it was on a Thursday, and I was like, "Are you coming back Sunday?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "You'll see how the sausage is made."
Yeah.
But it's brilliant. It's
Yeah. Oh, it
great.
is. Yeah.
But it's yeah, it's so the Q&A is the closest to improv because people ask questions, a lot of the same questions,
Hmm.
but it's a way that they think you're talking about it for the first time, so they're less judgy
Uh-huh.
and more accepting and willing to laugh, at even just of a smidge of an idea
Yeah.
that may be just what you need to give it the confidence and to build on it. So on the album, a bit that came up, and I haven't even written this down or worked it in, is flying there, the TSA agent patted me down and said that on the the X-ray screen, it looked they had to check under my flap,
Oh,
my skin flap to
yeah.
make sure I wasn't hiding something. And so this woman asked a question like, "Do you have any more stories about losing weight?" And I just told, not even in a jokes way, hadn't thought of jokes. I just verbatim told the experience I just had from flying from Cincinnati, from
Uh-huh.
CBG to Salt Lake City, and it got a great response that I actually now have to go back and listen to the album and write it down and be like, "Okay, that I naturalistically presented it this way. Can I
Yeah.
replicate it that way, and will it still work?"
Right. Right. That's great. And that's a perfect transition into the newer thing I have going, Is This Anything? And so basically we both bring a joke or a premise to the table, and we decide if it's good, if it can go forward, and
Or
give
kill
each
it,
other
up with its head.
give each other tags if or bring the ball in. Just bring the ball is back.
Reel it back in. No more caveman serial killer bits.
Yeah. But yeah, see if we got something. And since you are the guest, you get to choose if you go first or if I go first.
I want you to go first because I know the 2 things I'm gonna present are part of, a chunk of a bit that's on the album that I'm looking to expand on,
Okay.
um, that they're under the same chunk. I just wanna see if there's more to them, and actually
Okay.
maybe 3 jokes. So yeah, you go first
Okay.
because
And
I'm excited to hear yours, and, like, comedians will then be like, "Maybe you could say it like this," and it's like, "Well,
yeah.
you would say it like that, but that ain't my voice."
Yeah. That's actually one of the cool things that's come from this is I get more feedback than I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I get more feedback from this than I've gotten from anything.
Oh, cool.
And I get people saying, "Okay, that was good. Here's tags," and I don't even know them. And it's really cool when that comes through. And then sometimes my guest gets tags, and I send them over to you. So
Well,
it's
that's what I love about talking with other comedians. You know when you sometimes have those comedians that are just like, "Well, I'm not giving him anything," and blah, blah, blah. But, like, I love 'cause I'm a writer, I love thinking in that comedian's voice of being like, I could never say this on stage because this doesn't fit my vibe or
yeah,
what I do." And I was like, "But I wanna give this to you
yeah,
because I would love to see it have a life than rather live in a box that will
yeah,
never."
right, yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of like a little writer's workshop, and
Mhm.
it's been working pretty well. So I'm going to preface this one by saying I need a new opener, and the reason why is because I had the most solid opener that I could ever have, and my appearance changed, so I couldn't do it anymore. So
Mm.
I used to have hair, and I wore contacts, and I went into a gas station to buy a soda, and the cashier said, "Hey, you look like an older Harrison Ford." And so the joke went from there, and basically, what's the last Harrison Ford movie you've seen? Because he's 21 years older than I am,
Yes.
and it really went well, but I don't look like that anymore, so the joke doesn't work.
Bruce
And
Willis.
yeah, 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 that might work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying something because I look even scarier now to people than I did then because I'm bald and I got the permanent scowl and stuff. So this is something I've put down that may be an opener. I don't know.
Okay.
Here we go. So I've been told by no less than 30 people over the years that they know somebody who looks exactly like me. My doppelganger is in cities I've never been. Really need to meet them though, because if they actually look like me with the height, the head, the perpetual scowl, I want to know how they're coping because I startle people on the regular. Every time I'm behind someone in a bar and they turn around and see me, it's this. I can see the fear of death in their eyes, and I need to know if my doppelgangers have developed a workaround for that. And that's all I got.
I think I would Seinfeld it. So for the first, I would do the word economy
Uh-huh.
of get out write it down and take a red pen and take out as many words that you can
Mhm.
while it still holds it. And I think you have a couple opportunities for left turns and misdirects.
Mhm.
So I would go, and again, I will preface this because I don't want to ever come off egotistical of like, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
This is what I hear to my ears is I would be like, you have no idea how many times I hear, I know someone that looks exactly like you. And so almost cut out like the specificity of the 30s of times and
Uh-huh.
people all over and be like, what you said about you being scary and off-putting, that almost to me is if there's so many people that are bald like me, um, why are we like basically a culture that's scared? I have two ideas in my head that I'm trying to work through. So many people look like you, so why is it scary?
Ah.
Like if so
Yeah.
many people look like you, why is it scary when I'm in the majority?
Yeah.
And then it's like, so it must be something that I'm personally doing that my
Uh-huh.
doppelganger is not. So turn it where it's not what are they doing that are
Uh-huh.
comforting others? What are you doing that's
To make
off-putting?
people uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
not figuring out what are they doing that makes people comfortable with having this Mr. Clean demeanor.
Uh-huh.
Like Mr. Clean's a welcoming guy, and he's
Yeah.
even a little risque. He's got a earring, so like,
Yeah.
um, but like so like small little things like that being like, so if there's so many people that look like me, but people are so threatened by me. What is it that I'm doing? I mean, maybe I should stop approaching people with a butcher knife held above my head. Like, I don't know, something like that. Or like, I guess I should stop approaching people by saying, "Give me all your money,"
Yeah. Yeah,
or like,
something a little bit ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
do that left turn misdirect
Yeah.
of like, I got to really figure out what I'm doing that if so many people look like me, um, I can never say I'm a one in a million guy
Uh-huh.
because there's I mean, there's an old A. Whitney Brown joke, um, that the population of China is blah, blah, blah. So if you can look it up on Google. It's a
Uh-huh.
good one in a million thing. Um, yeah, that's the angle I would go with is more self-deprecating, less, yeah, you looking so similar to so many people. It's almost as if you are wearing a bald man's costume.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Did that help? Is there anything?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
This
and I've really been struggling with it because it's I know when I know what the feeling is when I walk on stage. It's just like
Mhm.
this guy does not look like a comedian. He looks like a bouncer.
Well,
And
and if you're gonna go the angle of the "I know what you're all thinking, this guy looks blah, blah, blah," which is
mhm,
and I'm gonna say hacky, not in the derogatory hacky term.
right,
That
yeah.
is that is an easy starter. That is
Yeah.
the, "Hey, everyone, like, I'm relating to you because I know what you're thinking. This guy is, Jeff Bezos, Lex Luthor, blah, blah,
Ah,
blah," doing all those things, Mr. Clean. But maybe then the bit is you naming so many people, like the 3 I just named, Lex Luthor and Jeff Bezos could be considered villains.
Yeah.
Mr. Clean could be considered villainous because of the earring. He's a little
Yeah.
dangerous. Maybe everyone that you say that you could look like is threatening, like,
Yeah.
is villainous. IT tech person, or I don't know, like,
Yeah.
I'm not up here to do comedy, I'm actually here to give you all a PowerPoint presentation on financial blah, blah, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I tried one that said, everybody thinks I either look like a cop, a pharmacist, or a serial killer, and I don't know how I could be all three of those things, and that I never really got to take that anywhere either. It
I
just
mean, that's funny that it's almost like a bullet point of this all being one thing that you just bounce around from, that you really don't spend a lot of time, that it's almost like you rapid fire hit all these ideas if you could figure out a smooth way to do it, but
uh-huh,
if you did it quick, because that I think that's hilarious. I look like a cop, pharmacist, or serial killer. Just the breakdown of that,
uh-huh,
a cop I mean, mostly trusted. I mean,
uh-huh.
there's some areas like, no thanks. Um, Pharmacist, like, yeah, pharmacist is non-threatening, I trust them, or
Mhm.
serial killer.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, but you trust serial killers, right? That's why serial killers are so good at what they do,
yeah,
is they get trusted.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
and I could also take it. I could also take it in a direction where I'm like, yeah, that's just preposterous. I'm not smart enough to be a pharmacist, and then just let them, and
that's
I'm not
funny.
lawful enough to be a cop, and then just leave serial killer out and let
Yeah,
them fill in the blank.
yes. That is I like that. I think that is how I would go first. And then if you did because you have no idea how many times people come up to me and say, "You look exactly like this person I know." So,
Yeah,
I think that is your then second. Your
yeah,
opening hit is, um, "I know what you're thinking. I look like I'm either a cop that pulled you over for a speeding ticket, your pharmacist, or a serial killer. But I
uh
have to be honest, like, I'm not smart enough to be a pharmacist,
yeah,
and I'm not
and
athletic enough to be a cop."
yeah, and it's a much quicker it's a much quicker laugh that way.
Yes, you're getting
Yeah,
meat and potatoes, and
yeah,
then you let it hang for a little bit, but not like, so it's serial killer, right?"
yeah.
Um, but then you go into the first thing people always wanna tell me is how much they think I look like someone else. Like, I think there's jokes in there about individualism,
Hmm.
of just like that you're not special. And then maybe there's a callback to serial killer,
Hmm. Yeah.
and you're like, "And that's why I have to let everybody know," like, I don't know, not this isn't the joke, but maybe something that's, like, on par, like John Wayne Gacy dressing up as a clown and going to kids' birthday party, like, "And that's why I gotta let let 'em know, the blah, blah, blah killer always leaves because I am important and special
Yeah.
and unique."
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, it's
And
dark and
that's
it's weird, and maybe that won't fit, like, the rest of what you have going on,
uh
but I don't know, maybe if you got them at the top with something like that, then you're open for maybe other weirder I don't know.
yeah. And I'm a little bit more on the weird side and a little bit more angry and stuff like that anyway. So that yeah, I can see that working. This is great because I've got something that I can do my first two jokes with now,
Mhm.
and they'll both be done in less than 2 minutes, and then I've got them going, and I can get into the rest of my stuff. And
Yeah, and it feels like you have, possibilities for good laughter in that first bit of cop, pharmacist, serial killer, that you hit a lot of you get self-deprecating, you get relatability, you get, um, cop and serial killer, which are 2 semi-hot button topics right now.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, it just seems like, yeah, you have a lot of opportunities to really rope them in right off the bat, and then them for the audience to get a good sense of what your tone is gonna be for the rest of the show.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's almost like
Yeah.
that's your first joke as a cliff notes of what you're gonna get, a summarization for the rest of your set, whatever it's
Yeah.
10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, that was a good one, and I'm glad I talked about some of the other things I've tried because I think I can make them work together now. And that this whole opening thing has been bugging me for over a year now because I just I haven't been able to find that one that does as well as the old Harrison Ford one.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to do some dad jokes and some real, silly, quick non sequiturs just to
Hmm.
loosen up the audience, and that's how I opened my dry I'm not sure which edit of the dry bar you watched. That's my only complaint about dry bar is the one that's up and in full on YouTube doesn't open with the opening of the show.
Yeah, I did the YouTube one, so I didn't
Okay.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the opening of the show that's part of the real special, if you, like, watch it on drybar.com, their app, or you rent it through Comedy Dynamics, it opens with, a couple quick dumb dad jokes of
Uh-huh.
just, like, by a round of applause, how many people have clapped their hands before?
Yeah, and I saw that clip, on
Yeah,
you did it on something else,
yeah.
and I thought that was really funny, and it was a great way to start.
There were just, like, 3 of those jokes, and then it's be like, "Okay, I know those are dad jokes, but it's okay, I just had a baby, I'm a new dad, blah,
Uh-huh.
blah, blah." And so that was my opener, but then for this new album set, I open with the ukulele, which then dovetails into crowd work, which I know can be
Yeah.
problematic to do crowd work off the bat because then you're open the audience to talk and stuff.
Yeah.
But with, like, the tone of me coming out with the ukulele, the questions that I'm asking, and the way that that goes, I feel usually gives the audience a good sense of, like, "Okay, we know what kinda guy this is. We feel pretty comfortable with his type of humor, that he's not judging us, and
Yeah.
that at the beginning, when you go into the crowd, they're like, 'Oh, no, that's why I didn't wanna sit up front.'" And then
Yeah.
once that's done, I don't pick on it's not even picking on the crowd, but, like,
Yeah.
they get to relax for the rest of the show because it's already done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like that part where you said, "Yeah, I really don't have anything prepared." Uh,
Yeah.
and you're doing an album.
Well, and that was my way of, like, that magic trick of, like, so many people think my biggest judgment on myself, whether it be acting or stand-up performing, is I don't feel watching myself that I come off naturalistic.
Uh-huh.
I always feel like I can see the machinations of performance happening. I always
Uh-huh.
I'm like, "Oh, I'm performing. That's a performance. I can hear it in
Yeah.
my voice and blah, blah, blah." Um, so the trick of that of doing crowd work, and then once I felt like the mine of the crowd work is welled up, is dry,
Mhm.
I will then try to connect wherever we're at with the pre-written bit and just slide into it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully I'm 20 minutes now into the show, and they didn't realize the real show started.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can dig that because I have the same observations about myself. I still feel like I'm following an outline
Mhm.
and trying to move past that, but it takes a lot of practice to do that.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think we are always chasing our voice, and I still don't know what my voice is. I have just become comforted in knowing that the humor I am doing and the things I am doing are the things that I want to do.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not going like, "Well, I can't do that," or "I'm not gonna do that because that isn't what I can sell better or whatever. I'm like, I like doing what I'm doing. I like doing what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And I'm going to that doesn't mean I'm gonna do it, and if the audience doesn't laugh, like, that's first and foremost, like, "All right, that thing's gotta go because as much as I love doing it, caveman, serial killer, like, it's gone."
Yeah.
Like, it's gotta be stuff that I like doing that also entertains the
Right,
audience.
right, yeah, yeah, and that's a delicate balance.
So
Alright, so
my
what you
bits.
got for me?
Okay, this is all in the chunk of and things that have grown that's on the album, a little bit and then can continue on for new stuff, like a new hour.
Mhm,
Um, and maybe it'll probably be in the new hour film special or variation of it, is the I know I'm getting older. Um, 3 bits are 1, I know I'm getting older by the way that I buy groceries. I get really excited when I'm buying meat and I see one that's a steak or ground beef for $8.87, but then I see behind it or next to it one that's $7.50.
uh-huh,
Um, little joke, like, doesn't ever
yeah,
get a real big laugh, but, like, something of, like, that to me is the lottery, like, that's
yeah.
the mini win in my day of just like, "Oh my god," like, "Oh, and this one's cheaper!
Yeah.
We did it!
Yeah.
Save 30 cents." But, like, those are the little things you grow to love when you're of a certain age.
Mhm,
Um, so that I'm working on. I'll do these first 2, I'll mention these first 2 before doing the 3rd one and see if there's anything more to add to them. The other one is my friend and I that I graduated school with, high school with in 2004, we're at a bar on a Wednesday night, and I was looking around, and I was like I said to him, I was like, "I think we're the oldest people here." And he looked at me and very nonchalantly said, "Yeah, I know we're the oldest people here." And the first thing I thought of was like, "Oh, he must have like an algorithm or like there must be something that he knows that I don't, some fact for him to so quickly absolutely say that he knows that we're the oldest ones here." And I was
uh-huh.
like, "How? How do you know we're the oldest ones here?" He's like, "You know how I know we're the oldest ones here? Because you just said, 'I think we're the oldest ones here.'" He's like, "Only people that are old ask that question.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
young person is asking, 'I wonder if we're the oldest ones here.'"
yeah, 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 the only other thing that you could add to that, I think, is whatever music's playing, you absolutely don't know what it is. Uh, and, I think we're
Is that an alarm? Is that a fire alarm, or is that a hot new track?
yeah.
Should we be concerned? Look, it's
Yeah,
loud. Are they
yeah.
trying to say we need to evacuate?
You know, I I love jazz, but the beat on this sounds like my rotor's going out or something, you know?
Yeah. When you start liking it to things around your house breaking down and thinking you need to call a professional to fix,
Yeah,
and that's what you're thinking of, and it's music,
uh-huh.
you know you're old. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
you might be a redneck. You might be old if
yeah.
the music you're hearing sounds like you're heating an AC unit conking out,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you get upset and sad because you know the money you get back for tax season's just gonna go back into fixing and now that song has ended, and you're
yeah,
still
yeah,
thinking about fixing things around your house.
yeah. Another way you could go with that is, this sounds exactly like when my HVAC went out. And I'm almost positive
Hold.
somebody was in my house sampling that.
Yes, and is this something from based off of what you just said? The acronyms that you know are
Yeah,
clear giveaways of your age.
yeah,
HVAC is an acronym you know when you're over 35.
uh-huh,
STD is an acronym you know when you're in your 20s.
uh I've actually got a bit about acronyms and slang.
Yeah.
So
I love
that makes
clever
sense.
wordplay as, like, a quick
Yeah,
little joke inside of a bigger joke.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that what I said earlier about the extra small versus extra large.
Right, yeah,
And it's hard with those because sometimes you just introduce the idea, and if you don't present it as a joke, people still think it's interesting as long as you're not hoping that there's gonna be a laugh there.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I think HV each H HVAC versus HPV
Yeah.
is I think that could be a good laugh moment.
Yeah.
Um, because you get the people that, like, relate to it, and then you get the people almost like Seinfeld said of "Don't end a joke on a curse word," because then it's the curse word getting the laugh.
Yeah.
HPV, which sometimes I'm like, "I don't care if it gets a laugh, I'm moving on to the next one," and it helped me
Uh,
get that
yeah.
beat, that beat of jokes or that rhythm. If I get
Uh-huh.
a laugh on HVAC and then a laugh on HPV, fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so for that first part about meat prices, there's another joke, and maybe it's part of this, and a friend kinda gave me this joke, was, um, I was at the grocery store. I'm so old now that I saw a buy one, get one free and floss, so I bought a lifetime supply of floss.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, "Yeah." So is that the same as the meat thing? It's like,
No.
yeah, that's an observation, but it's not necessarily, like,
Yeah. You know,
gut busting.
something the only thing that I'm thinking about the meat thing is it needs to come back and bite you in the ass. Like there's a reason why it was 30 cents cheaper. Like it's
Because it's
all
less. There's not
it's
as
all
much.
yeah, well, it's all bone, it's all
Oh, yeah.
gristle, all that elation has to turn into disappointment and
Yes.
then I think it'll really hit. But I'm not 100% sure. Okay, I got the meat home and my wife said she wanted strip steaks, not T-bones or something like
Mhm.
that.
Something
S-
deprecating about you because, like, I used to, I had been saying, like, it's the differences of, your old base on what's in your shopping cart of,
yeah.
like, you'd go there and you'd just buy for yourself. You'd get a
Mhm.
12 pack and you get a bag of chips and a pizza because you're
Uh-huh.
only buying for that night. And when you're
Right.
older, you're out buying 3 pounds, 6 pounds of ground beef and going, "Oh, man, this one's $8.37. Oh, holy grail, this one's $7.50."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and so I think maybe there's more to just getting people into the grocery store, like, getting them in that headspace
Mhm.
of, like, because people it's such an arduous thing of grocery shopping, and that if you can find those little delights of, like, when you're grocery shopping, if there could be a couple more of those, and that could be the under the umbrella of, like, yeah, you're old
Yeah.
because you're finding delights in the grocery store.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
So the
there's a lot of meat on the bone there. I used to do one about finding a coupon. It's a great day. I found
Mhm,
somebody left a coupon for antiperspirant, and on top of that, I think it was buy one get one half off, and um, but the problem is I got it home and it gave me a rash, and I always
mhm.
I I always take my good thing that happens and I bookend it with something disappointing.
Charlie
Just
Brown.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
you got another well, there's another for the bald thing
yeah, yeah,
of, like, not only do I look like Charlie Brown, but the cumulus cloud that's been following me for my whole life or
yeah,
whatever. Um, yes, I mean, I think that's a bit unto itself. The karma or the serendipity of, like, for every good thing that happens in your life, it's followed up by a sour.
yeah,
The
yeah,
sweet ain't as sweet without the bitter.
yeah, yep, for
So
sure.
the third one, this is more of a joke that I've never done on stage because I wanna find a cleaner way to tell it, but I'm wondering if the only reason why it's funny is because of the dirty, is it goes into the I'm getting older. I'm getting older because 'cause I'm actually I've started having to go to funerals of people that I know. people, unfortunately, that have died at the same age. And nothing is more awkward and more reflective than going to a funeral of someone your age and realizing that you're wearing the exact same thing as the person in the coffin.
Uh,
How was I supposed to know that he was gonna be buried in a "I fuck on the first date" t-shirt? But
okay, what so it's really good the way it is. I mean, that's a huge misdirect. But I mean, what other t-shirt could you put in that's clean?
that hits as hard
Yeah,
as
it's not
that
I can't think of anything that's gonna hit that hard.
that turn.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um, Hannah Montana t-shirt? Yeah.
but how was I supposed to know that we'd both be wearing our Dora the Explorer t-shirts?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
depending
again, it's not gonna hit as hard as
no.
because 1, no one should be wearing a "I fuck on the first date"
Yeah.
t-shirt
Right, yeah.
and wearing it, or the nerdiness of the comedy of it all is no one should be wearing that, no one should be buried in it, no one should be wearing it to a funeral.
Right, yeah, yeah. But, yeah, Dora the Explorer fits there in the same way, but different,
Yeah. It would
because
have to be
you're both too old to be wearing them.
yeah, and it would
Um,
probably have to be something that's more prevalent now than even Dora the Explorer, like Coco Melon, Baby Shark,
yeah,
or I don't know, but again, yeah, I've racked my brain of being like, "Oh, how did I know that we both were gonna be wearing a I went to blah, 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 and all I got this t-shirt. All I got was this t-shirt, blah" or
uh-huh,
like a tourist thing,
mhm,
or a Big John like, even if you say Big Johnson, what you're doing is you're just telling a sanitized version.
yeah,
I'm trying to find that network television late night talk
yeah,
show clean version of that joke
right,
because that goes with my a bit that has been working that is newish, that is on the album, is the I know I'm getting old because I started saving plastic grocery bags from the
yeah,
grocery store as trash bags,
uh-huh,
and when people are coming over, we're trying to impress, we switch out the Walmart bags with Target bags,
yeah.
and then if we're really trying to impress someone, we take out the one Whole Foods bag that we got 10 years ago. But so, like,
That's a good
that
bit, yeah,
the
yeah,
funeral thing works in
mhm,
there with all that other stuff, but it's not yeah, I don't kn is there a clean look, if anybody is listening,
yeah,
um, or watching this later, or Facebook or whatever, or Twitter, and you have one, comment, and I would love to find one that is just as ridiculous and hits all the reasons why it's funny.
yeah, 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 that's because those go together so well, and but that punch, "I fuck on the first date" is just perfect. It's gonna be hard to find one. I'm gonna be thinking about it all day now, because there's gotta be something, like a
And
band
this is
T-shirt.
not my first time bringing it up, like, it's almost like this is a Sudoku or a riddle or a math puzzle that
Yeah,
I've brought up at least on 5 different road trips with other comedians,
yeah,
where I'll just be like, "Check this. Can you come" like, and it's not even
yeah,
saying, like, that is an amazing joke, it's just like the Olympics of can you make are some jokes unable to be made clean?
mhm, yeah. You almost wanna have, like, 5 T-shirts in the chamber based on how the audience is reacting to your other jokes.
Yeah, and the permutations of the night because then I've had people so I said you get a lot more work if when people say, "Can you work clean?" and then you find out what their level
Yeah,
of clean that they want is.
uh-huh,
I have had the reverse of that, where some people don't wanna necessarily book me because they think it's going to be quote unquote "clean comedy," which
yeah,
may be less than funny comedy, and I assure them, I'm like I can be dirty. I just don't filter myself, especially in the improvisations
Yeah.
or the crowd work. Um, I'm not gonna be like filthy and vile and disgusting,
Yeah.
but like as I have on this podcast, this episode has some R moments, like the
Uh-huh.
I fuck on the first day, like
Yeah.
that would be considered an R that some places would be like no efforts.
Right. Yeah.
But like, so I assure them, I'm like, there are shows that I've done where they're just like, oh yeah, we want you to be a little dirtier. And
Yeah.
it's like, great.
Yeah.
And so if I had that joke in three different variances,
Yeah.
the clean version, the late night clean, and then the R version, which is what it is,
Yeah.
that would be a great one to have. And it would
Yeah.
be interesting to see if you can make it work just as strong in each
Yeah.
permutation.
Yeah. Yeah. The same response on all. Hello Kitty t-shirt.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, 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 Hello Kitty, something that is a close to 40-year-old man should not be wearing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fun. Yeah, figuring out something that what is current, that is associated. Oh, well, maybe it's what are those half shirts? Crop tops.
Yeah. Crop tops
But how
or
did I know
midriff
we both
shirts.
were gonna be wearing crop tops?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't think it hits as well, but
Yeah.
I might try that.
You could try that. You know,
Yeah.
you could have a throwaway line at the end of that and say, and our blazers match too.
Yeah. How did I
So
know we both were gonna
you're
be
wearing the
wearing
t-shirt, you're wearing a crop top with a blazer,
That's
and it
funny.
makes
That's
it
a
even
funny
more
visual.
ridiculous. Yeah.
How did I know we'd both be wearing crop tops and that pinstripe blazer from Men's Warehouse?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like
Yeah.
the little hat on a hat.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Of like,
J-
look,
d-
look, they weren't completely ridiculous and buried him in just a crop top. They
yeah.
put a blazer on him.
Yeah. Yeah. They
It was
dressed it
his
up a little
favorite
bit.
crop top. Yeah.
Have you ever worked with Jeff Bodart?
No, but I am familiar of Jeff Bodart. I have definitely seen
He
his poster and
Yeah, he is
stuff
the
around.
king of those throwaway lines that almost overshadow the punch. And it's kind of like when Gaffigan goes into his voice, but
Yeah.
he does it. It's just a throwaway line at the end of a joke, and it seems like it's totally off the cuff, but sometimes it actually overshadows the punch a little bit.
I
And
mean,
so
that's an art.
yeah, that laugh that he started just rolls for longer and longer because of that. And he's got an album on Spotify. You should listen to that to understand those throwaway lines because he is the master of it.
Yeah, I will, and that is different comedians who I've witnessed who can do that, who, like you said, just keep the rhythm and the laughter roller coaster still rolling, and then they've moved on to their next thing, and the laugh hasn't stopped, like, the
Yeah,
wave is still going in some
yeah,
way. It's masterful.
yeah, yeah. He's great at that. So where can folks find you on the social medias, website, and all that kind of stuff?
I'm everywhere. You wanna Google my name? You can find me, which is such a weird thing to say. Like, before online and social media, if you went up to a stranger and was like, "Hey, follow me."
Yeah,
And not only follow me, like what I'm doing.
yeah,
Like, it's so weird, and that is the hardest part about this business of, like, self-representation and branding and marketing, blah, 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 like, all that. But, like, Instagram, at Glore Ricky, you'll hear all about upcoming film projects, shows, where I'm going. RickyGlore.com, it hasn't been updated, but it should get you to all of the social medias of, like, TikTok, Twitter. I use Twitter primarily as a writing tool for
uh-huh,
word economy.
yeah,
Um, that's what I felt it's best for. And then Facebook, .com/Ricky Glore Comedy. I mean, it's kind of just all the same stuff shared on all the same
yeah,
platforms.
yeah,
There's no uniqueness.
Yeah.
really to any of it. But yeah, be on the lookout for All Your Friends Are Dead coming out. What we're going to be doing with some more movies. If you want to search my name on iTunes for or Spotify for the two albums that are out, Dad Bod Special, it's out. The special recording in April, which my guess will come out probably in the fall or summer.
Mm.
I'm not sure what that's going to be titled yet. But check all that stuff out. And if you want to hear me talk about more nerdy horror movie things, when I was doing promotion for All Your Friends Are Dead, you can iTunes search me or Spotify, and you'll see all the guest appearances that I did on
Yeah.
horror podcasts. Where one show's called Top Five, where he let me pick the subject, and it was top 5 masks in a horror movie.
Okay.
And we immediately got rid of Michael Myers, Leatherface, Ghostface, and Jason, because we were like, those, of course, clearly they're Mount Rushmore.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about other ones that people may not be as familiar with.
Uh-huh.
So I think we each did 5 and then like a couple honorable mentions, which is a great way to, like you were saying about introducing Phantasm or Hammer movies,
Yeah.
great way to introduce people to some horror movies that they might not be familiar with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to check those out being the horror geek that I am. So yeah, that definitely the five top masks.
That was one of my favorite ones because it was specific. Another one is I'm getting ready to record another episode for them is oh, I don't want to missay it. Say like I'm gonna be like, yeah, they're really good and I like them, and I can't remember their name. They're Terrified and Tipsy podcast. So
Oh, okay.
THEY apostrophe RE Terrified and Tipsy podcast.
Uh-huh.
They do watch alongs. So they did
O-
a watch along to a short horror movie I made called Racist, Racyst. And it
Okay.
was like a David Cronenberg body horror
Oh,
um, horror short film I made. They did a watch along to that. And I love their response that when I was promoting All Your Friends Are Dead, I came on for a full episode and we just nerded out about horror. And it's these two women that are hilarious
uh-huh.
and just have just a different outlook on horror, and they watch everything. But
That's
they are
cool.
like stereotypical, like Midwestern kind of mom vibes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so like their approach and their comments on it are really funny.
Yeah, that's great. I'll check that one out too. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. This is one of my favorite writing exercises because I've got s-
Yay.
I've got some meat to take away to my next open mic.
If you ever want to do a condensed version of just like an offshoot episode that is just like the writer's room or whatever, that's
Uh,
just that,
uh-huh.
I'd be more than happy to come on. And I bet you other comedians would, I mean, just hearing again your approach to the different things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's such a valuable tool
Yeah.
because sometimes in your community, comedians can get a little stingy and are just like, well, I'm not going to give you gold.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, what are you gonna do? You gonna
Yeah.
put that in the bank and collect some interest on it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. And I always come out of these with more ideas even beyond what I've talked about. And
Mhm.
that's that's gold right there because sometimes it's hard to think of those premises and
Cool. Yeah,
it's good stuff.
to be in the right headspace.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. And everybody check out rickyglore.com and also that movie. I can't wait till the movie comes out. All Your Friends Are Dead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.